Life group leaders, this is Pastor Tom, and I deeply apologize for how late this video and questions are getting to you. No excuses. Just had a busy week and actually lost sight of needing to do it. So here they are. As the two that I want to look at are Matthew 25:31 through 40. This was the difference maker. And I'm going to tie both of the readings together just a little bit. Um, because we did that 2 weeks in a row, the difference maker. And I think that's a really important topic for us all to be focusing on. I want to take you to Matthew 25. And before you get to verses 31 through 40, I just want you to take a look at Matthew 25, and I want you to see what's covered there. Matthew 25, it starts with the parable of the 10 virgins. You know, the 5 were wise, they had oil for their lamps, the other 5 didn't. It's all about being ready for an event, being ready for a wedding. The bridegroom's coming and you're not ready. The picture is the second coming. It is all of us waiting for Jesus to come, and then he's going to say, come, it's time. And then there are going to be those who have their lamps and they're ready, and there's going to be those who don't. The very next one is the parable of the talents, that a master goes away for a long time and he leaves these talents with these individuals. And the first one, as you know, put it to work. The second one put it to work. The third one buried it. I don't know if you've ever tied those two together, but the one who buried it is like the woman who didn't have oil in her lamp. What he's adding when he talks about the parable of talents is that while we are still living in this kingdom, God has given us things to do. Well, it's tied to the Great Commission. Go and make disciples of all nations. Teach them everything that I've commanded you, and do this until I return again, and I'm going to be with you always. But what if someone hears that command and buries it? What if someone hears that command and doesn't put it to work? Well, it's like the women who didn't have oil in their lamps, or it's like the one who buried it. Then Jesus gets even more specific with the parable of the sheep and the goats. So in verse 31, the question we have to ask ourselves is, what time period are these verses referring to? And the time period is the end times. It is the return of Jesus. And the Bible tells us that he's going to come from his heavenly throne, and he's going to separate the sheep from the goats. He's going to separate humanity in two groups. Not 400 groups, not 1,000 groups, not 1,400 different denominations. He is going to divide all of humanity into two groups. I want you to see in verse 34 that it's, or I'm sorry, in verse 33, he says he's going to put the sheep to his right and the goats to his left. And when it comes to biblical language, right is good and left is bad. Left hand is going to be one of judgment. Right hand is one of grace and blessing. So the sheep are to the right and the goats are to the left. And I just realized this is my right, but it's probably left to you. But anyway, verse 34, then the king will say to those on his right, come, you who are blessed by my Father. Take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you for since the creation of the world. I want you to see the invitation to come. I find it interesting. I've kind of honed in on a couple things here as I've been studying this. And Jesus starts out by telling his disciples, come follow me. And for those who properly follow Jesus, and for those who become believers in Jesus, and those who continue to work out their life and their Christian faith and live out that life, live out that transformation, that it's not just something cognitively in the head, but it's a transformation of the whole being, we hear once again, come. Unlike what the goats are going to hear, go, depart from me. So isn't it interesting that the proof of our worthiness to come, he says in verse 35 and 36, I was hungry and you fed me. I was naked and you clothed me. I was in prison and you visited me. I want you to jump to Matthew 28 and the Great Commission. Go and make disciples of all nations. All authority in heaven and earth has been given to me. So go and make disciples of all nations. Nowhere here does Jesus say, go build a church and hope they come. He says, go. I've given you talents, now go. You are now my bridesmaid, waiting for the groom's return. Go, be ready, go. And he says to the sheep, you did it. It's not about your works. It's about the fact your works show that you had right faith. Your works show that you were truly believers in Jesus Christ and transformed by the power of his grace and his word and his Holy Spirit, because you went and you fed the sick and you went and made disciples. You went and did it. And like Jesus, he's referring to acts of mercy, because the acts of mercy always opens the door for the act of redemption. Jesus healed and then earned the street credits to preach. And if the 21st century church would wake up and realize we have to be a going people, we have to meet people's needs no differently than Jesus met people's needs. And the next step will be that they want to know more. They will want to have a deeper relationship with Jesus. Verse 37 through 39. Do you find it interesting that we won't know that we did these things? The righteous answer the Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you? When did we see you naked and clothe you? When did we see you in prison and visit you? When did we do that? What do you think about that? I mean, if we're going to live transformed lives for Jesus' sake, if we're going to live out put our talents to work, then how is it possible we don't know what we're doing? Well, we do know what we're doing, but what he's saying is it becomes so natural. It becomes so part of what we're doing. We're not doing it for him to earn anything. It's just naturally flowing out of our lives. And as it naturally flows out of our lives, we can't help but touch people, heal people, care for people, feed people. We just can't help it. It just comes out, and the last day he's going to say, see, that's the evidence of true faith, because you did the works that I did. You did the same thing that I did, and in so doing, you not only met people's earthly needs, but you brought them into the kingdom of heaven. You made them believers and you made them disciples, because you taught them to observe everything that I've commanded you. Verse 40. We live in a upscale, upper echelon, wealthy county. Who are the least of these in our 21st century ministry? Who are the least of these around Firmly Rooted? I guess I just want to encourage you. It's anybody who has a need. It doesn't have to be they're hungry. They could be hungry for truth. They could have faced abuses in their lives, and they simply need to be loved and accepted. It could be a person that has everything, the most wealth that possibly could be had, but they're lonely and lost. And they need a friend, and a friend who loves them for who they are, not what they have. I don't know what that looks like for you. I know what it looks like for me, but I guess the point is we're supposed to have a heart of mercy to reach out for anyone that's not in the kingdom. Listen to what I just said. We're not supposed to just have a heart and mercy for people in the kingdom. We're supposed to have the same heart for people not in the kingdom. And just like Jesus, we're supposed to love them into the kingdom, draw them into the kingdom, because we're light in a dark place. Now, I know that I went through this reading really quickly, but please take your time going through these verses. I mean, Jesus is talking about the end times, like the way judgment's going to be. If this is the way the judgment at the last day is going to be, and you and I are going to end up in one of two piles of humanity, two groups, what do we need to know about the group that we want to be in, that we think we're going to be in? Where might the enemy lie to us? Where might the enemy deceive us? Most likely that, hey, I'm going to church, I'm going to church, I'm going to church. He said, go into the world and make disciples, not go to church and worship. And not that worship's wrong. You've heard me say this a million times. Worship's not an ends, it's a means to an ends. We worship so that we might be empowered to go. Now talk about being a difference maker. How can we be difference makers in our family, with our friends, with our neighbors, with people we work in, with clubs that we belong to, groups that we belong to? How can we be difference makers and hence put our talents to work? To end up hearing the invitation, come to me. Come to those places I prepared for you. Wow, how powerful. All right. Our second reading, I just want to go back to last Sunday. I thought last Sunday was really, really powerful. Kimberly, I think, did an amazing job looking at the benediction. And so it's Numbers chapter 6, verse 22. And again, spend time looking at this. Spend time focusing on this. We're going to look at words, and you got to let them hang out there and let the scriptures just scream out where, not just in one place, but many places, this is true. So in Numbers 6, 22, 23, we have very clearly God telling Moses to tell Aaron, this is how you're going to do this. Everything from the way the tabernacle looked to how the priest dressed, to how, what they, God controlled every bit of it, but especially the blessing. How are you going to bless the people? You're going to bless them with my words, the Lord. Kimberly did a great job explaining that Yahweh Elohim, the Lord God, where Elohim is a bit abstract, Yahweh, the Lord, is intimate. When God comes to Adam and Eve, he's Yahweh, but he's also the Elohim who created the universe. He's always both. He's never not just one or the other. He's always both. But here he wants to be known as the one who's present, not the one who's far off, just kind of watching everything, but the one who's right in the midst of things, the one who's in a burning bush looking at Moses saying, listen to my voice. I'm calling you. You're going to redeem my people. The God who, with Gideon, makes noise and angels fighting. The God who puts in Elijah's eyes the chariots of fire that are going to fight for him. How about that God became incarnate so he could be present, that when we see Jesus, we see God the Father. When we touch Jesus or he touches us, we've been touched by God. Lo, I will be with you always. I will never leave you and I'll never forsake you. Man, you could just, I hope a lot more verses are popping into your head, but we want here to make sure that every time someone hears the benediction, they're hearing the intimacy of God, his nearness, his closeness, his fatherliness. The Lord bless. Kimberly explained that Hebrew word is like bending down and offering a gift. You know, you bend down and offer a gift. An example would be when Jacob was coming back home and Esau was meeting him, and Jacob was sending all of these animals and everything as a gift. When he finally gets to Esau, he drops off of his animal and he prostrates himself and bows down before him and tells Esau, these are all gifts for you. The giver of the gift is giving humbly. I was challenged that whole idea of God bending down to us is kind of sacrilegious. Because again, we have this idea that God is way up there, higher than us. But listen, think about it this way. I would argue that if God doesn't bow down to us, then we're eternally lost. If the God of the universe doesn't come to us and give to us, not because we deserve or earn it, but because of his grace, you see, look at the incarnation itself. Jesus leaving his throne and coming and being a child born in a manger to a know-nothing woman, living an obscure life, not in a palace, not in a temple. His humility alone shows. Jesus says, I did not come to be served, but to serve. He washed his disciples' feet. The death, the crucifixion of Jesus, it's the epitome of God bending low and giving you all he has. This is pretty profound. The Lord bless you. Not just you as a group, you as an individual. And he's going to get more direct here soon, but it's not an abstract blessing. It's an intimate blessing from God because he is an intimate God, Yahweh, who is bending low to provide for you and to give you of his grace and his mercy and his providence. The Lord keep you. Again, Kimberly did that great image of it's like how do you keep your animal safe when you're out in the desert? Well, either you stand guard 24/7 and don't sleep, or you put a hedge of protection around them. And remember, that hedge would be made out of thorn bushes that they would pull from the hills, and they would weave them all together, and then they would chop off the thorns on the inside, and on the outside would be the thorns, so that it would be difficult to steal. It would be difficult for an animal to get by and kill, and the animals could be kept safe. The Lord bless you and keep you. May we never hear the word keep like somehow he's keeping us in his pocket. But it's more like he says that he has you in his hands and nobody can snatch you out. That God is not only providing for you, but he is protecting you. And not just you now, but how about globally, like a church? His kingdom, his work to be done in this earth. He's not only going to provide for that work, but he is going to protect us as we work so that we might accomplish the tasks he has for us. The Lord make his face shine upon you. Kimberly talked a lot about that face, and I think of Moses leaving the tent. Every time he would leave the tent talking to God, his face would glow. I think of Jesus transfigured on the Mount of Transfiguration, white. That God is a God who shines upon us. Jesus is the light of the world. That God turns his face towards us. He makes his face shine on us. Well, it means that he wants to be seen. That he's not a God who can't be seen, but he's a God who can be seen. He can be seen in how someone else loves you, who's a Christian, how he reveals himself in the Word. If our spirit's tuned in, we should hear, experience, and feel God's faith and that warmth of the shining upon us. I encourage you to go back and listen to the message again and feedback some of the things here that were spoken then. Be gracious to you. The Lord be gracious to you. The Lord pour out his grace, his love. It has to do with everything, not just providence, not just protection. It has to do that it's who God is. I desire mercy and not sacrifice, Jesus says. Love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. That the God of the universe is gracious towards us. He showers his blessings upon us. Because he's a father who loves us, he loves us as his sons and daughters. He's going to be there for us. The Lord turn his face, lift up his countenance, turn his face towards you. Kimberly talked about how intentional that is. If my grandchild or one of my kids cries out or calls me, I turn my face towards them. Every time you pray, God is inclining his ear to you. God has angels that watch over you and watch over me, and they go back to heaven and talk to him, and wow. God is actively participating. He didn't like in the past actively participate, die for us, rise again, and say, okay, now you guys go figure it out. He continues to be very active in how he leads his church. Our job is to connect to that activity. Our job is to seek his will. That's why we can be any part of the body but the head. He turns his face toward us. Well, the opposite is that he would turn his back towards us. When the God of the universe turns his face towards us, it means we're acceptable, that we're good, and give you peace. And Kimberly talked about the whole idea of shalom and harmony, but she also said that, peace is not always the opposite of strife or suffering. It's that we have a God who can make everything work to the good for those who love him. We have a God in which we are more than conquerors because of what he has done for us. That death, life, angels, demons, principalities, powers, heavens and earth, nothing can separate us from his love. That he's bringing order into the chaos. And I think that's really, really important. The closer we get to Jesus, the closer we get to order. And hence he says, I'm the way, the truth, and life. Stay close to me. And now you're living in order rather than the chaos. Look, we got a crazy world out there. And it seems to be getting theologically, philosophically, psychologically, sexually, monetarily crazier every single day. But not so for those who hunker into Jesus, not so for those who live under the blessing of the benediction. He speaks order and peace into our lives. Well, friends, again, I want to apologize for this coming to you so late. I love you all, and I hope that you get this in time for your life groups. And please forgive me for getting it out so late. Have a familiar day, and since it's Saturday, I hope to see you tomorrow for worship. Peace.